I thought he was a firebrand. I think he did a very good job. That was populism. That was democracy. It was messy at its finest.
Did you just say messy at its finest?
Well, yeah, democracy is messy, isn't
okay.
it?
I mean, there is a certain snootiness from the media about some of these appointments. It's seen as if like it's an attack on expertise, but I think maybe what the Americans want is an attack on expertise.
Donald Trump has been very explicit. He wants to go after some of his political adversaries.
If he wants to go after Liz Cheney, or Nancy Pelosi, what is there to stop him, Tom?
There's very little to stop him, especially if you have a loyal attorney general. Absolutely very little.
Who's he going to sack first? Trump from his cabinet. Hello and welcome to the American Forecast. We now know the shape of Donald Trump's administration, and it's like nothing America has ever seen before. Firebrands, mavericks, and disruptors make up the bulk of the government. There's the tech giant, the news anchor, and the governor who shot her family dog and goat. The unifying factor, their unwavering loyalty to the president-elect. So, can they shake up the establishment to the benefit of ordinary Americans as promised, or will we just see overreach, outrage, and ultimately perhaps implosion? To discuss all this, I'm joined by Jennifer Ewing from Republicans Overseas UK, Thomas Skiff, the director of the UCL Centre on US Politics, and our very own correspondent, Kiran Moodley, who's just back from a month at Mar-a-Lago. Sort of, Kiran. Did they offer you a job?
No. Oh,
Were you angling? Were you angling?
To be confirmed.
To be confirmed. Okay. Hold that space.
Yeah.
Okay. Jennifer, let me start with you. What are you more pleased by in terms of picks? The chief law enforcement officer who was once investigated for child sex trafficking, or the former Fox News anchor who's now going to be running the biggest military machine on the planet?
Sure. So I think it's a bit disingenuous to call Pete Hegseth the Fox News anchor.
He was also a soldier.
He was a soldier. He served.
But he is a journalist. He's a TV host.
He served in Iraq and Afghanistan 20 years. He's got bronze medal. He runs a lot of veterans organizations, which is actually how he ended up on Fox News, talking about those organizations. He's 44, so I think he's a good pick. And
he doesn't want women to serve in combat.
In combat, yeah, he's okay with pilots. But actually, I'm not a military expert, but there are a lot of military experts that do say women do not belong on the front line. So I defer to, his wisdom in that. I've not been in the front line. He's not saying no women in the military at all. He's saying in certain positions, you need the strongest people. It's a military. It's not,
So you're a fan of his?
Yeah.
What about Matt Gaetz?
Matt Gaetz, look, that's definitely the biggest heavy lift.
Attorney General.
For a multitude of reasons. That's a heavy lift. We've got a few senators that have already come out and said, I'm not sure I'm going to back him. What will be interesting is if President-elect Trump used what's called the recess appointments to get Matt Gaetz through. But
big picture, these are the people, these appointments, if they get approved, indicate that Trump, during his campaign, was very serious about the promises that he made.
He still has that mandate of the popular vote, the electoral vote, and 75 million people that thought the country was going in the wrong direction. The biggest issues that people voted on: economy and inflation, and of course the crisis at the southern border. So let's not forget about the other appointment, Tom Homan. The border czar. That is probably, I think, one of the most exciting because because he's done the job. He's worked under, I believe it was 5 or 6 different presidents. So he's worn the uniform. He's done the border control job.
So as someone who has been working for the Republicans overseas, you fully expect there to be mass deportations, as Trump has promised, on day one?
Yes.
What does that actually mean in your book?
Sure. So what that will look like is, and just for anybody that's, continuing with the fear mongering that they're going to break into somebody's house and steal somebody's abuela or something, that's not what we're talking about. There's actually a lot of low-hanging fruit. We know that there's approximately 1.3 million people who have already been told, hey, you've broken some sort of a law. You need to check in with the Department of Immigration. So they're going to go after the criminals first.
Tom, I want to turn to you. When you look at these appointments that Trump has made, What message does that send to you as an American and to the rest of the world?
Well, the first word that you mentioned in describing his appointments was loyalty. I think you might say that it's fealty, but it's one of the two, certainly. Donald Trump doesn't want to commit what he perceives as the mistake he made in the first term, which was to rely on status quo, Washington insiders, inside the Beltway types, public servants who have spent their careers in Washington, essentially. This time, he really wants his own people. And I think the fact that he had 4 years in the White House, had 4 years out, gave him time to reflect and figure out exactly who were those people who were loyal to him all the way through. And they're being rewarded now with jobs. The second message that it sends to me is that Donald Trump is serious about disrupting the status quo, that he wants to drain the swamp. I'm a little bit skeptical whether he can actually be successful in that, because if there's one word that defines Washington, it's status quo. And there's so many factions and entrenched interest and roadblocks that Elon Musk and others who kind of want to go in and clean house will encounter, that it's going to be an uphill battle.
Is there anything, Kiran, that I know that, there's a clean sweep. He's got the House. We don't know the exact numbers, but he's got the House. He's got the Senate.
Yep.
Of course, the Supreme Court, made a big ruling more or less in the favor of any president acting as president back in June. Is there anyone that can stop these appointments?
So there's some appointments which are people who are based in the White House where that he doesn't have to go through the Senate for those. The other ones in the cabinet, like the Matt Gaetz and the Attorney General, that has to have Senate confirmation. And you have to have a majority for that. Now, interestingly, actually, you used to have more than that, but the Democrats changed that rule 11 years ago because it was the Republicans holding up loads of Obama's appointments.
So a simple majority does the trick.
Exactly. And so the interesting thing with Matt Gaetz, for example, is that why would Trump talk about having a recess appointment? Because if you just need a simple majority, he has 53 senators, so he can do it very easily, which I think points to the fact that he's obviously worried about pushing that through. The Democrats still can do what they did last time, which is delay. And that was one of the reasons why Trump has spoken about the recess appointments, because last time they delayed all of his appointments. I think at one point the Republicans said it would have taken 11 years to get all of his appointments through. There's an interesting question here about what will a Trump second term look like, because when I was out on the campaign trail, one of the things which always came up...
On your job hunt.
On my job hunt, yeah. One of the things which always came up was that a lot of people, young, old, whatever, said the world was a lot safer and calmer under Donald Trump. Now, you can argue whatever you want about that.
Which doesn't necessarily chime with disruption.
No, but so there was a sense that we need... I guess the sense is that we want a disruptor and someone who's different, who has non-experts, because we went with the wonky experts under the Bushes. We went with the wonky experts under Obama. We went with them under Biden. The world is now not as safe. I think the conundrum there, though, is that if you are saying things were calmer and more safe under Trump, back then, in the first term, he had those experts, the John Kellys, the John Boltons. So if they've all now gone, will the world be safer, and will America go in the right direction? That is the conundrum, I think.
And there are two issues here, aren't there? There's the issue of policy, and then there's the issue of temperament or tone. And the tone is much more abrasive than it was last time. And the policies seem to be much stricter or much more robust than they were last time. And I just wonder, Tom, whether when you look at the personnel that's been appointed, although they're still waiting to be approved, well, a lot of people are outraged by the tone that some of these people have uttered. But is there talent there? Do you see expertise behind the tone?
Well, I think that there are some interesting selections, and chief among them would be Elon Musk. So if you're thinking about trying to run the government in an entrepreneurial way, in a way that a manager would, I think that there's probably few individuals who would be better positioned to be able to do that. Now, whether Washington, again, can operate like a corporation, I'm a little bit skeptical of.
It's also quite funny that in the Department of Government Efficiency, they appointed two guys, Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy.
Who will not be getting paid.
Yeah, but there are two people. There are two big egos trying to sort out this problem.
Absolutely. And
that could be a problem.
I do think that everyone's fairly chummy now, but the one thing that we saw during the first Trump administration is that many of his high-level appointees ended up resigning, saying very critical things of Donald Trump. So whether Donald Trump can maintain kind of continuity in personnel, I think will be a big challenge.
Okay, let's go through some other names then. Kirsty Noem, the governor of South Dakota, the famous goat and dog slayer, although she's famous for other things as well. Good appointment?
I mean,
Jennifer?
I just don't want to hear sad dog killing stories during the Senate
But
confirmation
we love
stories.
dogs in this country,
We do,
Jennifer.
that's
Careful
what I'm
what you
saying.
say.
No, I said I don't want to hear it.
Remember Mitt Romney?
I said I don't want to hear it. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I just absolutely don't want to hear it. So, look, it was
okay, beyond the dog thing,
beyond
the goat
dog,
thing.
yeah,
Does she have talents?
Yeah, she absolutely has talent. She ran one of the freest states during lockdown, South Dakota.
That's
during
not
lockdown.
talent, though. That's just a position that she took on COVID, right?
Well, I'd say that's talent. I'd say that's bravery.
And she will now be in charge of the border.
She
right?
will be in charge of the border. So, yeah, interesting pick. I think she will get through.
The argument is that the border will be the priority. Matt Gaetz being appointed, one would argue, is not about a priority of a border or an issue. It's a priority of Donald Trump putting himself first. I mean, why do you think he's chosen Matt Gaetz, who has no experience, other than the fact that he has criticized the Justice Department because it looked into Matt Gaetz and it's looked into Donald Trump? Does that worry you, that the idea that actually his appointment of Matt Gaetz shows that Trump's priority will be retribution?
I hear what you're saying, definitely. And he's not my favorite pick. Let's put it that way. I thought he was great. 2 Januaries ago, I remember watching over cocktails with my father when they were trying to, get rid of the Speaker McCarthy. I thought he was a firebrand. I think he did a very good job. That was populism. That was democracy. It was messy at its finest. However, he has also done, and I'm saying this as
Did you
somebody
just say
who is
messy
not,
at its finest?
well, yeah, democracy is messy,
Right,
isn't
okay.
it?
I'm just curious, yeah.
But to answer your question, I say this, he's not one of my favorite picks. He has done some very good things with regards to law in Florida, right? He has fought back against corporatism. He's fought back against more money in campaigns. He has fought back against Silicon Valley monopolies. So there are a lot of consumer protection things that Matt Gaetz has done that people like. He's also gone against a lot of the way the GOP thinks. On certain
But I don't think
things.
that was mentioned. That wasn't mentioned in the press release, was it? That he's going to go on these campaign finance rules or whatever. It's,
no, of course.
I think
it wasn't.
But Trump would have chosen him primarily. Do you not think because he's spoken about a rigged system within the Justice Department?
Trump has a legitimate gripe, shall we say, against the DOJ and the way, I think we can all agree on that, and the way that it has behaved against him over the last 18 months. The DOJ going after a political opponent, which is something we've never done in our almost 250 years of history, is the reason Donald Trump is president right now. And we know that because in the GOP primary, Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, and Trump were neck and neck. The second the Alvin Bragg thing came out, Trump numbers go through.
Isn't the danger, Tom, that Trump can do exactly the same now that he has accused the law officers going after him? He accuses the DOJ of having gone after him. He has now got the wherewithal, if he wants to try and do the same to his enemies.
I think absolutely. And certainly getting rid of the cases against Donald Trump was a litmus test for anyone who's going to be the new attorney general. But Donald Trump has been very explicit. He was during the campaign, and he still continues to be, that he wants to go after some of his political adversaries. I do think that some of that rhetoric is ultimately just sort of smoke. But at the same time, I think that he has made very strong claims about sort of wielding the Department of Justice and other state-level apparatuses to go after.
If he wanted to go after his opponents, if he wanted to go after Liz Cheney, or Nancy Pelosi, as he has indicated in the past that he might, what is there to stop him, Tom?
There's very little to stop him, especially if you have a loyal attorney general. Absolutely very little. And it depends, of course, how much pressure he wants to exert on that.
And right. And Jennifer, I want to know from you as an American, you represent one party, one of the great parties of the state, or overseas, the grand old party of Abraham Lincoln, et cetera. We know all that. Are you comfortable with a president going after his opponents, with the law?
Absolutely not. And I've been on every single.
But if they do, what would you say?
No, I would say that's the wrong direction. Absolutely,
but that might happen.
As a matter of fact, I think he should pardon Hunter Biden. I think he should pardon Hunter Biden. I don't think that's totally far-fetched thing for him to do. He's not going to go after Nancy Pelosi. He's not going to go after Liz Cheney. I really hope that's not the direction he goes in. After all, he did not lock up Hillary Clinton, and he could have for that Russian hoax. So to answer your question of what will stop him, the American people will stop him.
But this is my question. So he might not go after them. But there might be other people underneath him who feel empowered to go after political opponents or enemies. Well, there might be people, his supporters and voters, who say, you promised us you'd go after so-and-so.
There will be some for sure.
And that is dangerous, isn't it?
That is dangerous.
You're opening the door to vigilante power if you're not careful.
Well, actually, the Biden and Harris administration already opened that with the cases that came towards Trump. I do not believe that Trump should do the same thing back to his political enemies. It will be the end of our republic. We do not go after political opponents in the United States of America. That had not happened until they went after Trump. So no, I do not want Trump to go after
Should he pardon the January 6th rioters?
Those are all very different cases. So, I think there's a grandma in there that happened to be standing there, case by case.
Let's look at the bigger picture of disruption, because disruption is one of the things that he ran on. You could argue that disruption is something that, America needs, everyone needs a bit of disruption. The question is how much and at what cost. So what disruption, Kiran, do you think that he will actually bring to the system of government in Washington that could be beneficial to the country?
Well, I guess similar to what I was saying before is in some ways you have to, there is a certain snootiness. Yeah, snootiness from the media about some of these appointments, and it's seen as if it's an attack on expertise. But I think maybe what the Americans want is an attack on expertise, an idea that the way things have gone isn't working and they want to go back into a sort of isolationist type route. I think the concern when you look at someone like an Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy doing this government efficiency is whether or not they really understand the workings of the federal government.
But the argument would be that you don't need to understand it. If you're going to disrupt it, don't get too deep into the weeds of it. Otherwise, you might preserve too much of it. But that would be their argument.
So, for example, the Department of Education, they've mooted. I think Reagan first mooted the idea of getting rid of the Department of Education, and it was in Project 2025. If you get rid of the Department of Education, right, because I assume the idea is that post-COVID, a lot of parents saw what their kids were learning on Zoom and decided that there was, critical race theory and all this, gender, whatever. If you get rid of the Department of Education, you get rid of federal grants which ensure schools for low-income families, working-class people who vote for Trump. You also get rid of federal grants which go to educations for kids with disabilities, right? So you're attacking the federal bureaucracy and saying it's all ridiculous, but actually you're having real effects to people's lives because two men have decided we think this is all bloated and ridiculous. When actually there are these minutiae of livelihoods where actually you need these systems.
The Department of Education has not been helpful to the education of American students. And I think people are looking at things like school choice. You mentioned, obviously, lockdown and everything. Okay, fine, maybe there's going to be some homeschooling. But a lot of it is just going to be, it's bloated.
Tom, I wonder if the problem with these efficiencies, with these disruptions, is that they are conducted, or they could be conducted. There's certainly been promised to be conducted in a spirit of anger. There's anger there. If you wanted to hire a management consultant to make your business, more efficient, you wouldn't want someone who is kind of shouting at the moon. You'd want someone who looks at the numbers very clinically and says, you don't need this and you don't need that. Is the anger necessary, or is it actually going to be counterproductive?
Well, I think it'll probably be counterproductive. But one thing that I would say is that I don't think that Donald Trump is going to blow up the system quite the ways that we expect, in particular because many of his policies are fairly standard Republican orthodoxy. He wants to pursue deregulation. He wants to pursue tax cuts, right? He wants to install conservative appointments to the courts. None of that is particularly radical. I think it's really his temperament, sort of the way that he goes about it, that does have some advantages. I think a lot of it is counterproductive simply because it puts the opposition in sort of a defensive posture.
So looking at the Pentagon, which is really interesting. So you've got Pete Hegseth, who you've defended as a great warrior, therefore an expert at running the Pentagon. A lot of his obsession with the Pentagon is the war on woke. There's a culture war inside the Pentagon. And, I've certainly been, listening to military experts, many of them Trump supporters, who say, hang on a minute, you want to reform the Pentagon, turn it into a more efficient fighting machine. Okay, some of that woke stuff is nonsense. But if that's what motivates you, first and foremost, you're making a big mistake here, right? You shouldn't be focusing mainly on the woke stuff. Because there's much more important stuff out there.
I don't think he's just focusing on the woke
But it's a
stuff.
really big motivator.
I think that this new generation of Republicans, and I consider myself to be the more populist wing of the party, we three of the biggest people that are going to be involved here, Tulsi Gabbard, Elon Musk, and Bobby Kennedy Jr., we'll probably hear something from soon, were recently Democrats. These are populists. These are people who do not want to continue with these forever wars. So that's what they're going to be looking at.
Let's move on to the economy then. So a lot of people voted for Trump, and I met lots of them when I was out there, because they felt the Democrats didn't feel their pain sufficiently. Democrats kept saying, look at the headline numbers, inflation is coming down, we're doing really quite well. And then, you go to CVS and you try and buy some toothpaste and it's like $8.50 a tube.
And it's locked up.
And it's locked up, which, by the way, that is something that really shocked me, that even the most basic things, apart from the tiny little travel toothpaste tubes, were all under lock and key, which is amazing.
Rather than lock up the toothpaste, let's lock up the people that are stealing the toothpaste.
Anyway, that's another subject. But I was really shocked by that. And I was really struck by the fact that Harris's message on the economy didn't hit home at all. And yet, if you take some of Trump's policies to their conclusion, right, we're going to kick out X million of illegal migrants, many of whom are serving tables at restaurants or folding hotel beds. We're going to be imposing tariffs left, right, and center. These will all be inflationary measures, which will make life more difficult for Americans. Kiran, am I talking a load of nonsense here, or do you agree with me? There's only one right answer, by the way.
I'm not an economic expert, but I guess those are the
Did you tell them when you applied for your job at Mar-a-Lago?
But those are the concerns which I think people have raised ultimately about Trump. And even I think Elon Musk himself said that the economy will get worse before it gets better under Trump when it begins. But I mean,
we know how these things look, right? Disruption without numbers. That's called Liz Truss. We've had that experience, and it was a pretty brutal one.
But elections aren't necessarily about the minutiae of policy. It's about vibes, right? And the vibe was that Trump was change and different, and that.
But it was specific also about the economy in many cases.
And Biden and Harris would say, well, actually, look at the numbers. The economy is actually much better than you feel it is, and the inflation was never as high and is much lower than it was in here or in Europe. But again, numbers aren't a vibe.
You can't feel the numbers. Well, you may feel the numbers, but they didn't feel the numbers.
No, and if you're talking about a difficult economic situation, who do you want? You want someone who's been on the scene for 4 decades, who is a businessman, who he's gone through bankruptcies. Maybe he's not that great a businessman, but he has that vibe of someone who will fix things.
Yeah. Tom, I think you hit the nail on the head, though, when you say that Donald Trump won this election because of the economy, and yet, ironically, his proposals are going to be worse for the economy. If you wanted to pick two policies that could not be worse for inflation, it would be to impose tariffs and mass deportation. He has called for anywhere between 10 to 20% tariffs on all imports into the United States, up to 60% tariffs on imports from China. And I don't think that that's cheap talk based on what he did in his first administration. And he has really been ideologically consistent on this issue, even dating back to the 1980s, 1990s, saying that China is essentially eating America's lunch. I mean, on the deportation, just constricting the labor supply, that's definitely going to
just to be fair for context, and you'd love what I'm about to say, Jennifer. When I was based in the US last, it was during the Obama presidency. On average, he deported 1,000 a day, but he did it quietly. But it was brutal and it was effective. And those communities were terrified that someone would knock on the door. I'm not saying that that's a good thing. Yeah. I'm just saying that it's happened. And and then when
people
Biden
forget that he 1.3, and then in the first.
But the thing is, but Trump is going to do the same thing in a more performative way as a disincentive, a bit like flights to Rwanda, which we've now scrapped in this country. But the idea is to be a disincentive. The second thing is this. Biden inherited many of the tariffs that Trump had imposed, and he didn't, the anti-China tariffs. He kept them, right? So China is a real bugbear for both Democrats and Republicans. And we'll find out how the Chinese respond to this and whether this is going to be a good thing or a bad thing, whether it'll be disincentivize them for going after Taiwan. Final question. Let's start with you, Kiran. Who's he going to sack first? Trump from his cabinet.
Let's go for Elon Musk.
Elon Musk, is he even too big to be sacked, surely?
That'd be the most interesting one. It's all about the drama.
Well, Elon Musk won't technically be in his cabinet, but I think that he is going to be the first one to go, simply because Trump and Elon Musk, two huge egos, eventually they're going to collide.
They're not the only two huge egos.
Well, that's true, but it's hard
they're the
to
biggest.
think about anyone.
Jennifer, what do you think?
Marco Rubio.
Oh, really? What's that?
I
You
don't
still
know.
think he's little Marco, right?
No, I don't
Not
think
a fan.
he's little
You're
Marco.
not we didn't talk about Marco Rubio.
No, we didn't. He wasn't my first choice.
The new Secretary of State, I should just say.
The new Secretary of State, yes.
Right.
But,
a man who once described Trump as an authoritarian third world wannabe strongman.
But
literally.
Trump's forgiven everyone for J.D. Vance to David Lammy.
It's all about kissing the ring.
Yeah.
Right? If you kiss the ring sufficiently.
Well, he likes to be transactional, right? So I think the UK, by the way, we've not talked about, is going to come out very well.
Why is that?
I think there's going to be trade deals made with the UK and the US in a positive way for the UK that will not be these massive tariffs, because he respects Brexit, he respects small government, and he will want to support the United Kingdom.
Well, listen, thank you very much to all of you. Jennifer, Tom, Kiran, thanks to all of you. That's it from the American Forecast. We will be back soon. The news keeps on coming. Bye-bye.